A man who for many years had worked on the puzzle one day suddenly found himself in the midst of the solution and immediately thought, how simple it is. No wonder I never figured it out. Shortly after life made man and got his intellect cranked up, sort of as a joke or maybe as a challenge, it pushed him toward the door and told him, okay, now go out there and get everything organized. Even among the ordinary, there are those who are simple and those who are more complex. Except in their case, they tend to be overly complex. Complex in ways that do them no benefit. Along the way, one guy thought, geez, if things didn't keep getting weirder, they wouldn't even be bearable. At the entrance to every transcendental highway is a sign declaring such an exorbitant toll fee as to keep out the merely curious and those in vehicles insufficiently complex to complete the trip. One such sign says, no one knows what they're going to say next, and those who can't see this can never go past this. One day in the middle of the meditative practice he had pursued for many years, a man suddenly was struck. My God, where might I be today if it weren't for me? Technical update from our service manual. A good question can be as useful as a good answer, but neither can match the benefits of an exploding small appliance. The difference between the few and everyone else. Men don't want to understand life, they want to discuss it. More stereoscopic views from a three-dimensional landscape. Religion, a philosophy in search of a name. Philosophy, a religion in search of certainty. Man does not have both a mind and a body until he has a mind to say that he does. After that, who's left to say otherwise? During the height of the morning rush hour, a man suddenly stopped his car in the middle of the freeway, bringing traffic to a standstill. Then at the top of his voice screamed, does anyone know what the hell life is all about? And a voice from several cars back yelled back, I do, but I'm late for work already, so if you wouldn't mind moving. Observing the differences between now and when he was younger, a man mused. I know that times change, but how much actually so do people? Many quite ordinary men like to say that simply being alive is a miracle. But the real one is a never understanding what being alive is about. Another version of how, why, possibly came about the notions of mysticism and secret knowledge. The nature of life in reality is so plain and obvious, and so few people ever seemed interested therein, that the few who were decided somewhere along the way in response thereto to start making it all sound more complicated and concealed than it actually was the case. Today's lesson. Just because there's a name for something doesn't mean it exists. And just because there's not a name for something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And just because I say this doesn't make it true, and just because you don't believe it doesn't make it not true. Lock up when you leave. The title of the ultimate expose. There ain't nothing to expose. When he first undertakes the mystical journey, a man finds many roads open to him. But after some distance, they begin to narrow and merge, and the many possibilities become but one. One man learned how to wrap silly putty in a metal jacket without destroying the integrity of either. No matter how educated or sophisticated you may be, you are a throwback to primitive times if you have faith in words. For to do so is to entertain spooks and goblins and believe in spirits from the dead. You'll never get rich and famous by explaining life, only by criticizing it. The continuing fable of the prize. After many years of searching for the treasure, a certain man finally came upon it. And when he opened the chest, he found it empty, and understood it was his duty to keep it that way. The scientific neurology of the simple and of the complex. A busy mind is not necessarily a more complex one. Thought to consciousness is as the asymmetrical to the symmetrical. Analyzation without originality is a joke. Not funny, but a joke. One mystic who never described his way described it thusly. It is like a picking of lice from your hair until you forget that there is a distinction between your hair and the lice. He also noted that while the word forget did not accurately convey what was involved, neither did any other verbal symbol. Today's tangled tale. There was once a king whose people were out of control. In an attempt to rectify the situation, he first sought to forcibly subdue them. And when that didn't work, he tried to rein them in through kindness, which was equally unsuccessful. Then, somehow, by accident, he did nothing but watch them. And lo, they ceased to be any source of disturbance. Moral: if you don't realize that this story is about your own thoughts and not about a bunch of unruly people, then a moral to it's a waste of time anyway. The consciousness of the awakened is like an armed fortress, but without the armament. The only thing anyone actually knows is that which is original with them. Addendum to our Manual of Interior Design. Books make better decorations to a room than do other people's ideas to a mind. All who find their way draw maps, but the more often they visit, the less interest they have in cartography. There is a mystic secret shortcut to mental and verbal efficiency. It's called the shut up. At first, a man is confused and not knowing, and with enlightenment comes understanding. But beyond that is an understanding of such a nature that it cannot even be called understanding. If you picture the intellectual life of man, which is, once you see it, the life of man. It's the only life of man that is discussable. It's the only life of man that distinguishes him from other creatures. Picture, oftentimes we're using the term middle class, middle of the road, the middle of life's parade of progress, to where everything, there is a middle of the road. It's like the core of life in man. But if you looked at it just to make a picturization, maybe my idea of life being a parade, and I've talked about the fact that the parade in toto moves along at a steady pace, and then once you see it in a kind of straight line, it looks orderly. And yet within the parade, there can be all sorts of minor temporal insanities going on. murders, muggings, all sorts of atrocities, all sorts of things that taken in isolation, you would have to, by anybody's definition, you would have to adjudicate as being regressive. That is not actually anything progressive. But the picturization is fair, because that is, even at the ordinary level, possible and does happen, that if you looked out and you pictured a parade of just thousands and thousands, much less 6 billion people in the parade, if you get away from the planet and you see the parade going, inside of the parade, there can be people fighting, killing each other. There'll definitely be people dropping dead. There'll be all sorts of things going on that are normally considered to be, if not untoward, unjust, insane, uncivilized. But yet you get away from it and you look at the total picture of the parade is moving along. Well, I was going to give you another sort of picturization, same sort of thing, but if you considered, for instance, that was the middle of this great highway and that humanity is marching down it, then what I was saying in the midst of the parade, just for the sake of a different spatial view of it, then consider out at the edge are more questionable areas. That it's just not quite that straightforward. If you consider right here civilization, you consider right here the sanity of humanity at any particular time, which you can call civilization once you understand in full what I mean by it, or you expand it more than just the idea of cultural and artistic, that it's only cultural and artistic basis, then it is civilization would be right there through the middle. And on the fringes of civilization you have, by its own definition, uncivilized activity. That is where you have, on the individual level, which is no great consequence unless you're involved, but where you have homicides, one person to another. At a larger level, it's where you have the kinds of armed conflicts going on that seem to be, by, again, any civilized view, absolutely despicable. That you have right now people, little factions here and there all across the world, killing one another, destroying their cities, killing civilians, unarmed women and children, etc. But notice at any particular time also, and this has nothing to do, as you know, I'm not trying to give a history lesson, but at any particular time there is always, somewhere on this planet, always has been, as far as you know of recorded history, there has always been a China, a Greece, a Rome, a Japan, a Europe, and America. There has always been somewhere on this planet the middle of the road there. There has always been, and I'm not going to try and qualify it for you because there's no particular number, but at any particular time there is a sufficient segment for life's purposes that is sane. It would be, to put this very simply, it would be whatever would be considered the forefront or would be exemplary of civilization at that particular moment. But also on this planet, everywhere, are the fringes. That which is not civilized, that which by any definition is not progressive. It is very likely regressive. It is just, you know it does not fit. You know that this is not the way ordinary people should behave. And we're not even yet talking about people attempting to do anything extraordinary. It is just uncivilized behavior. But now let's go from that being a widespread collective picture I'm talking about and consider the way it begins to affect a man individually. Because what you have in the intellectual, the mental life of man is you have the same situation. And I'll do a dramatic pause here for a second to try and prepare you for the fact that this is getting so simple and so blunt that I know how it is that you start thinking, wait a minute, it was making sense up until just then. So I was pausing for a minute to let you get your breath and then for me to say, look, this is real plain, but the mind does not even want to think this way. Okay? Intellectually, and it happens collectively, but when I say collectively, now we would be speaking of the area wherein civilization, the middle of life's collective parade, that within that, not only are they behaving in a civilized manner, by their definition, by anybody's definition, that they are more or less living a decent civilized life and that by and large, the people are no great physical threat one to another. But there is also a civility in their intellect, not just behavior, but in their intellect. And the civility manifests itself how? I'll tell you. By everyone thinking more or less the same thing. That is, that reality is the collective thought. And those of you who are getting good, reverse that. And those of you who are getting real good, then reverse it back where it started. And those of you that are really, really good, do it, reverse it, turn it back, and then forget it. But we'll go on. There is sanity in the intellect. And sanity in the intellect is the same thing as civility in behavior. It's predictable. For those of you that requested it, and I was just swamped. I couldn't even bring them all up here to request for me to please repeat the fact that if by now you cannot listen to ordinary, sane, civilized, educated, sophisticated people, world leaders, philosophers, political pundits, if you cannot hear them now make an important comment on some pressing matter, and they start the sentence, if you cannot finish it without even trying, you have not been paying any attention. Well, now consider, I've hit this sort of like a drive-by shooting or sideswiping your decent car parked there by the curb, but we've never stopped very long. But now, I've been trying to set you up for the last few nights. At any given time, let's use TV, so don't worry. You flip on TV watching the news and whatever seems to be a pressing matter in the external world. It can be on just simple political basis. It can be the financial affairs. And we'll go ahead and we can use our country since we are the middle of life's sane, civilized midsection, middle of the parade. It could be on fiscal so-called problems. It could be on social questions. It could be on anything. And you can have anybody that they're interviewing, from the president to the secretary, whatever the problem is, secretary of education, the head of the treasury, or they can bring in a political commentator. They can bring in the most respected political writers for the New York Times. They can bring in, if it's other matters, they can bring in heads of religions. They can bring in moral philosophers. Anybody that you immediately recognize. We're just taking the ordinary sane view that this person is a pillar of civilization and that they do represent some sort of deep philosophical, or as deep as possible, philosophical insight into whatever the problem is. And they say, well, thank you, Mr. Secretary, or thank you, Mr. President, or thank you, Cardinal so-and-so, or whoever it is, for being here. And this is a very serious problem going on now, and it could be all sorts of horrible things. It really seems to be a pressing problem that, indeed, if it did run unchecked, it could tear up civilization. If they start saying, well, the murder rate's going up, or the economy is beginning to regress at such a degree, we may be going into not just a recession, but all sorts of things, a depression. What do you have to say to this? And he says, yes, indeed, though, this is one of my gravest concerns. Our full Senate committee, our full church, my whole department is working on this. We're considering very strongly. And, well, first let me give a little background. Or first let me tell you what we think the immediate future holds. Whatever it says, and you can see the reporters, you can see, if you can just see ordinarily, you can see that locale, in this case our country or wherever it is, you can almost see the intellectual, sophisticated people of the country going, when he says, right, that's a serious question. That is what is now taking up the main of our effort. So let me start off, and we'll try to move along, but let me tell you how we look at the problem now and what we see as the immediate, the short-term effect of this, and then what we're trying to do is a long-range remedial effort. And you can see the whole country going, because it indeed seems to be a serious problem. And you think, well, at least they brought in somebody. They have got the best minds in their field. Maybe they already give you a rundown of the Blue Ribbon Committee that has been now appointed under his direction. And it's the heads from all the great centers of learning and all the civilized institutions, and you think, well, here is somebody that will say something worthwhile. Once he starts the sentence, all you got to know is just generally, you just have to catch a feel for the rhetoric of the sentence. Whatever he's going to say, like, well, here's our short-term prognosis. If he just gets the sentence going and you can't finish it, I don't mean, well, trying. I don't mean, well, what's he going to do? If he can't start it, in your mind, go ahead and pick it up like a song that's already been number one in the top 40 for like 16 months. You know, it's Stairway to Heaven. It's Hey Joe. It just goes on. You can just hear it over and over. He starts. Well, we say, and if you can't hear the answer, you have not been listening. That's a nice way of putting it. Because there is no place for anything approaching originality. There is no place in the middle of life's healthy midsection for anything approaching creativity. Of course, both of those two terms are synonymous. I could pick out two or three more, and they still almost appear to be, or could be, called synonymous. And they do not actually cover it all, but there is no other way to put it, which is why I drew that, and I'm going to press on. You do, don't consider the conclusion and don't draw a judgment from it. But you do understand, surely you do, that you do not, or just think about it. Experts, civilized people in whatever field. I just try to give you a full range from all the way from financial affairs to moral questions. You do not have experts, not in a civilized area, who are going to say anything unexpected. They simply are not. Now everyone, you must understand that. Just think a second. Last time we were here, I made a real quick example just as we were getting through about, and it sounded almost like a joke, about, well, how can you imagine if they said, well, here he is, you know, Dr. So-and-so, he's just been elected, he is now the head of the Federal Reserve Board, he is now the president's economic advisor, and under him now, and they list all these things, but today, here he is, he's got 2 degrees in economics and business from Cambridge and Harvard and this and that, man with the pinstripes. You just feel, and they're talking about that the economy's beginning to slip. You're a little concerned. You know that many people, even if it's not hurting you personally, you know that many people have been crying for the last few months that the economy could be just falling apart. We could be in the same shape as some of the other third world, or some of the third world countries, or the newly emerging republics that have not been able to get into the 21st century economic. In other words, you know that there's a feeling of great anticipation, perhaps fear economically, and you don't want things to fall apart. And so here he is, and a guy, and he just looks. He's got that confident look. You just know he smokes a cigar when he's off in private. Got on a $1,000 suit. Just got the look. He's got that kind of confident look. And they say, well, what do you have to say about this? You know the great concern that's being expressed from all quarters, conservative and liberal, about what's happening to the economy. Yes, I do. And thank you, Bob, or whoever reported it. Well, let me go into this. I'm going to tell you, we have been, as you know, since the president appointed me a little less than a month ago, and I have called upon some of the best minds in the Western world, and we have been meeting in private, et cetera, and we have all been thinking about it, and I'm going to tell you the truth. All of us, we're just about scared out of our shorts. We don't know what the hell is going to happen. I am scared to death. No. At a very crude level, of course, I knew you would laugh, and it's no surprise, just on the basis that it's on the basis of its non-sequitarianism. Don't write me. The unexpected nature of it, that is not going to happen. I mean, you can't picture it happening. But again, think about it. There is nothing logical, there is nothing reasonable that would tell you that that cannot happen. There's nothing logical that would tell you that if indeed, well, let's assume that there is, however they would judge it, that there is some basis for this growing sensation in the country of economic doom or economic severity over the horizon. If that be true, then who should know it above all? The leading expert? And if he did, and that the average Joe in the street's concerned, he should be scared shitless, right? If he knows more, and just little bricklayers now has reached the point that they're staying around in bars drinking, and they normally, all they're talking about is football and women, and suddenly the conversation starts about the economy. You know, are the oil shortage going to start again? We're going to be in lines waiting. Are we going to be able to afford gas? Is that going to happen? Am I going to lose my job? And they start talking about that. If they're frightened, then what would be unreasonable for the head, for the man appointed to look into this, and he and all the experts have been working on it, for him to be truthful. They appoint him to tell us the truth, to bring us up to date, and he'll go, Well, after studying it, Bob, me and all the committee, God, we're just about scared out of our wits. It's possible. There is nothing. There is no rule in the cosmic order of things that man could not put that sentence together, right? Put those words together, because it might be a reflection of reality, right? But will it happen? Why? And those of you that are getting better, you know it has nothing to do with the economy. It has nothing to do with the United States. It has nothing to do with people. It's life. Part of being civilized, right at the heart of being civilized, is like this calm area in the middle of the parade, or calm area if you look at in the ocean. Constant waves battered everywhere, and if all you have is a very short-range, simplistic view of things, you look out and it's waves, waves everywhere. Not so. There is a place that is like, it's like home base for the Flying Dutchman. Oh, no, I shouldn't. The doldrums. It is like a freeway of invisible doldrums, to where right in the middle of all the non-stop action of our oceans is this calm area. That is what civilization is. And if there is one other prediction or one other characteristic that must be extant for calmness, is predictability. You do not want surprises. You can look at uncivilized behavior as being that which is unpredictable. The example I gave you, if you think you live, that you say you're just a middle-class person in a middle-class area of some middle-class town in a middle-class country, and you go every night, or anytime you want to, you drive down the street and pick up a paper, or you get up and you're a little tense and you go out and run. Sometimes you find yourself, you're visiting somebody in the middle of the night, you get up and decide to go look for a paper or something. Anyway, you walk down the street and somebody mugs you. Not only is that uncivilized, but what else does it represent? And even when they will interview people, and they'll be flustering and about to hyperventilate, and it's bad enough that they got mugged, and they said, I'm surprised I got my life, and they took all my money, $2. What are they actually upset about? And many times they'll even say it, they'll go, it was just so unexpected. It was just, I couldn't believe that would happen to me. I couldn't believe that would happen to me in my neighborhood. If we go from, they were visiting, perhaps it happened in his neighborhood. I should have left it at that. That some mugger got out of his neighborhood and ended up over there and held the guy up. It is extremely frightening. Now, I know that sounds like behavior. Well, it is behavior. But what is extremely frightening and is absolutely intolerable, the more that we're talking about the middle of life civilized area, is the unpredictable going on. Because if you see it another way, that is a broader definition of what crime is unpredictable behavior. Because you can't really call it crime if somebody tells you what they're going to do to you. I don't mean just before they do it, but if somebody writes you. Now, I know legally they could still say it was a crime. But if somebody writes to you and says, next Tuesday, which will be the 9th, if you come out of your house sometime between 9 and 9:45, I know where you live. Of course, if the letter gets to you, you know he knows where you live. And it says, I am a professional mugger. I do at least part-time. And I will be in your neighborhood next Tuesday, January the 9th, between the hour of 9 and 9:45. And I want to tell you now, and I've seen you out. I know that you jog a lot around that time. If you're out and carrying any money, because I've seen you stop in the store and buy a Slurpee or a paper, I am going to mug you. You're sincerely, Mr. X, or guess who? Wouldn't be dumb enough to sign his name. Do you hear me? Outside the literal, judicial, otherwise of this whole little affair, you understand? In one sense, that has gone beyond a criminal act. You understand? Because if nothing else, if you're as sane as he was, or a little bit saner, you will not go out next Tuesday between 9 and 9:45. Now, I know I assume all of you get it. In a sense, that is taken beyond the realm of criminality. Because if nothing else, you remove yourself from the possibility of being a part of a criminal act. So how could you be uncivilized if all uncivilized behavior, that at least you got a letter? Maybe registered so that they'd be sure you got it. And you're being warned of the impending uncivil behavior. You're being warned of, you're given notice that a criminal act, there's a plan to perpetrate it upon you, and they give you the specific time and place, it is really no longer a criminal act. The closest thing to be a criminal act would be if you'd be stupid enough to go out there, right? So what I'm trying to get you to see is far beyond any ordinary street-level definition of civilization and criminal behavior, as you see, but I'm expanding it to what it actually represents. It's unpredictability. Now, if we were talking again about the world as I do of man's intellect, as we start out, which is all this is really involved with, but if we were actually talking about, back to my kind of diagram of man's nervous system, and this be the level of consciousness, you understand from here down, that kind of level, to make the arbitrary distinction between a man's intellectual life and his physical life, just this we would have in common with physical creatures on this planet did we not have an intellect. From here down, there is no such thing as that which is unpredictable. Not in the sense we talk about. Animals are attracted, as the natural physical food chain is, they're attracted only to places they normally have a business being, either where they can eat, and bless their little non-thinking hearts and heads, or else they're attracted to a place where there's something that needs to eat them. But there's nothing unpredictable. I've already made jokes enough, surely. You do not ever see a poor gazelle looking up in the line suddenly leaps out of the bushes at its throat and then look surprised. There's nothing surprising. There simply is not. There's nothing surprising going on. There's nothing surprising going on as the lion gets it down and starts to eat, and suddenly 27 hyenas show up, which is more than even a lion wants to fool with. You never see a lion like, what is this? Hey, the lion knows what it is. There's nothing surprising. In a sense, that is it's not important, but I was going to say in a sense, that is a lower level world of civility. Animals do not insult each other. They do not engage in unpredictable behavior. If they do accidentally, two animals that neither one of them is a part of the menu of the other one, but perhaps they in common eat some other creature, and they suddenly, one of them wanders out of its area, and they meet each other, that's the closest to being unpredictable, or something unpredictable occurring. But as a rule, that is not it. The physical world is just as predictable. You know, if you want to take it now outside the world of the woods and forest, look at you. You know, from the level of consciousness now, just you physically. There's nothing unpredictable going on. If there is, you're sick. You're physically ill. But normally, there's nothing unpredictable going on. Your stomach doesn't have to sit around and wonder if you're sane, which is what we're talking about here. If you're civilized, your stomach doesn't have to, minute by minute or day by day, think, what is that stupid son of a bitch going to put in me now? Of course, we know that some people eat tacos and drink beer and do weird other self-destructive things. But ordinary people, your internal organs do not have to worry that something unpredictable is going to happen. In the sense that the mind looks at it being sick and, of course, dying. That's why people always say, God, it was unexpected. Well, if it came too fast, of course, they can't say it about themselves, but they'll say about other people. Such an untimely death. Which you want to check your watch and think, well, you know, it is only in the mind that there's a possibility of the unpredictable happening. You follow? From down here, there is none. If it happens, it is an absolute anomaly, and it's no more than suddenly two creatures that share a common food source, and that they're normally separated spatially, and one of them ends up in the other one's territory, and neither one of them dines on the other one, you understand? And they're both going after this third creature, and suddenly look up and go, what in the hell is it? And they would just turn and leave. It's like, you know, extreme, if animals could, like extreme embarrassment, like, ooh, you know, excuse them, why? You know? No, I'm sure they would run and get behind a tree or something and go, what the hell was that? You know? For whichever one is lost tries to orient himself, like, you know, have I got sunstroke or... So, anything that happens that is unpredictable in the physical world, in the animal world, in you, from here down the animal world, is an absolute anomaly and is of not even enough consequence worth any more discussion. I've made up about as best an extreme example as even possible. It just does not happen. That is not part of the weave and woof of the physical world. But up here it's possible. Up here it's possible. to be uncivil. Up here it's possible to be criminal. Up here it's possible to be what's worse than all that. There's one more. And friggin' sane. Everyone knows that. Well, the more civil you are, the thing always works out. Now, if you're getting close to the edges over here, that you're just on the periphery of civilization itself, you're kind of a low life, even if you're living in the midst of civilization, you understand that you're in the, generally speaking, in the lower area of the totem pole in your area. To you, criminal behavior is not that big deal. Because chances are, every now and then, given the chance, you might engage in it. At least you've got friends and relatives, you've been held up a lot. You must know that. It's only when a banker gets mugged that makes a paper. He's the one that squeals. Somebody on welfare, some unemployed bricklayer, somebody over at Big Bruno's Black and Blue Bar comes out and somebody mugs him. Chances are he's not even going to go to the police. There's more trouble than it's worth. He didn't lose that much. It's no big deal. He's certainly not going to suddenly go on some kind of campaign about what's happening to this country. Because tonight he could have been the muggee, but as I said, very likely, under a different condition, just slightly, he could have been the muggor. So it would seem from that kind of view at first I could say, well, what would be the real threats to civilization? What would be the real threats? Again, remember that civilization I used to represent the middle of the road, the stable part at some particular place, our place says, on this planet at any given time, that life is moving along at its normal, mechanical, our pace, progress, move forward. But within that would seem to be great threats that sooner or later, whatever is the representation of this, it falls. The Roman Empire fell. After that, Greece fell to Rome, and then Rome fell to the Huns, and etc. That something's always going on. It just shifts slightly. And so that you're finally going to fall. That is, the movement, the area is going to shift somewhere. It just does. But before that actually happens, before the so-called downfall of some civilization or before its demise, there is a constant, like a group of hyenas always barking at its heels, always snapping at it, but within its midst, which is the uncivil, the less than adequately evolved intellectually beings within it, the men and women within that. And so at first you get, and everybody can agree with that. Come on, you can agree to that, okay. And so you can say, well, what are the threats? And you'd immediately go, well, criminal behavior is the obvious one, exactly. I mean, there it is, just uncivil criminal behavior. You cannot have a safe, stable, thriving, progressive, developing society, civilization, if there's too much crime, which is unpredictable behavior. So the criminal element is, that's always been it. Whether it be on, as I said, the individual level of a mugger in your neighborhood, or, as I'm sure you can imagine, Caesar and everybody looking up and seeing Attila and them coming, and going, my God, we're about to be mugged on a scale you wouldn't believe. Because there it was a mugger, except it wasn't one mugger on you. It was a horde of muggers on horseback about to mug a whole society, a whole civilization. So, they were uncivilized and they operated in criminal ways. They did not live by Roman law. They just came in, they were just a bunch of thugs. That would seem to be the height of the threat. Literally, allegorically, would seem to be the height, the most exemplary threat, individually and collectively, and yet it's not. The real one is insanity. Now, I could call it other things, I'm just being point blank. This is what ordinary people would call it. It represents a bigger threat. Quantitatively, it would not appear to be so, because I shouldn't say that anymore. I started to say there are more people in prisons than there are insane asylums or mental hospitals, but nowadays I don't know. That wasn't important, but I was going to give you something else to look at that even if now it could be equal for all I know. But it does not make the news. It does not seem to represent that threat, even if right now there would be more people locked up in mental hospitals, put away, let's say not by their own volition, that a court has ordered them, because of their family, because of the community, because of the state, is said this person cannot look after themselves, which what they're saying is we can't deal with them. They're a threat. Even if they were, right now, more people locked up on the basis of their mental condition than because of their criminal behavior, even if that were true. Look at it this way. What makes the news? Do you ever hear a news report of, my God, last night, right here in Detroit, 3 people were locked up for depression or just for their psychotic condition. 3 people within the first 10 hours of a brand new year acted in such uncomely fashion that their families, decent people, had to rush and find an all-night magistrate's court and have them committed. No, they say 3 people within the first 6 hours of the new year were shot. It's only criminal behavior. The reason I went through all that is you could immediately deny what I said, that the real threat, the worst threat, is insanity. But you never hear of it. That's not what makes the news. You follow that. It just does not. If there's ever a mention on the news for somebody being locked up, for somebody being forcibly extracted from the midst of civilized people because of mental reasons, it will be a very famous person. That is, a very formally sane and ordinary person. Some shrimp fisherman down on the Louisiana bayou who gets put away, they can put him and all of his kinfolks away for mental reasons. That's not going to make the paper. But if the guy who was on that Blue Ribbon Committee studying our fiscal problems, who was appointed by the president, if one of them, after a week of studying the problem, suddenly they find him, out in the street going, he's wearing his jockey shorts on his head and rolls between his teeth going, and they lock him up. Now that'll make the news. Plus, come to think about it, even scare more people about the economic future. But anyway, it takes someone who was seriously sane and probably a public figure for there to be any public notice of them going over the so-called intellectual edge, which is getting out here. All right, now consider. Now I'm trying to get to the serious part, the useful part. You got to run this by real fast. You got to continually think, collectively, that is out here, and then internally, individually to you. Because it's going on the potential. The reality of this is in each person, but it's also right out here, right in front of you, continually. That is life in its midst. And let's assume that everyone who's hearing this, and all of you that I'm addressing, will assume that you are, for all intents and purposes, part of the middle class, sane part of life. In your cases, I'll put it this way, we'll be more truthful. All of you pass, so you know what I mean. All of you got enough of it that you know what it is, even if you don't like it. But now consider what what it represents. You never hear anything out here in the middle of life's body, in the healthy part. You never hear anything surprising. There is nothing unpredictable going on. There's nothing shocking said. Oh, there is, but it falls outside the scope. It falls off the radar screen of acceptable, now not just behavior now. They might call it behavior. But here it is, the man that they question him, the head of this financial forecasting committee, that the president. And he says, well, yes, we've been studying the matter, yes, blah, 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 and we understand the concerns of the American people. And after studying this now for close to 2 weeks, night and day, I'd like to say we're just about scared out of our wits too. You understand? That is completely unexpected, but that's not behavior. That was just something he said. I'm not just playing with words. I'm just saying that the next day they would say that Dr. So-and-so was committed, not committed, they wouldn't say that. Last night, Dr. So-and-so, what they put, entered a hospital under doctor's advice, has admitted himself to such and such hospital because of what immediately appears to be extreme fatigue and overwork. That's what they normally say to, when you got a suit and a tie on, they just say, You've been overworked. And they could say, as a matter of fact, the spokesman for the president pointed out that his unusual behavior last night at the live news conference, obviously, and nobody's going to question it. Nobody's going to laugh. Nobody's going to stand up and holler. The emperor doesn't want, he's got his shorts on his head. They will say his surprising behavior last night was an obvious manifestation of the kind of extreme hours and effort he had put into this formidable task that he had so charitably undertaken in the name of all the American people. In other words, he kind of lost it, but it's showing that he did it for you. You know? Dr. Goldman went crazy for your sins. I mean, it's like Jesus brought up to date, I guess. Instead of died, no, he went crazy for your pocketbook. Not crazy, he overworked himself to the point of extreme fatigue. Of course, again, if it had been a shrimp fisherman down around the bayou and they had taken in those, they'd go, well, whatever happened to old so-and-so? He cracked up. He went nuts for the same thing. But Dr. So-and-so's commitment to the welfare of the American people and the high task placed before him simply overdid it to the point of extreme fatigue, and he needs a rest. And 4,000, sounds like Thorazine. And some shock treatment. Well. But now listen. I'm going to try it again. We've done this, as I said, I've sort of hit it back and forth before. And it's not really talking about life, and it's certainly not a criticism of life, but I'm trying to get you to see the position in which you live in this kind of net that's just floating right above the surface of this planet. Not the physical planet, because you're standing on it. And at that level, you're in the same kind of predictable position as every other sane creature, every other sane, reasonably healthy animal. The energy is flowing right up through your feet. The body is working, and it gets up to here. And the few people that are inspired, that are inflamed in a certain way, they keep looking and listening for something else. And you've got to snap out of it. I would like to collectively, with not doing any real harm, slap your little faces. Or do again say, have you been listening? You've had 30 or 40 years here on this planet. You've listened to all the world's great thinkers, philosophers. Do you realize you have not heard one thing new in 40 years? Now, in ordinary mind, that means nothing, and I certainly wouldn't be arguing with them. But again, it's so point blank and blunt and obvious. You can take your right ear. All of you know about this right ear, left ear theory. Oh, that's right. I just made it up. I forgot. But anyway, you'll be hearing a lot about that, I'm sure. Is with your right ear, you can hear that, well, yeah, that's just obvious as hell. And then your left ear thinks, no, it's not. In fact, it can't be true. If your left ear is fairly intelligent, it will not say that it's not true. It'll just say, that can't be true, which is always a nice way out for the routinely intelligent amongst us to go, well, that can't be true, which is, they mean it rhetorically. That is, I never thought it, and I can't see it right now, so therefore, it's got to be quite questionable. I hope. Nothing is said that is out of the ordinary in the mainstream of life. If it is classified immediately, not because men do it, life immediately shunts it off into this, over to the edge of the highway, that they put away Dr. So-and-so, or they admit him for health reasons. The point is, if he'd got up and said something like, well, we've been studying it, and I know all the concerns people had, and we have been up almost nonstop for the last 2 weeks. And I'm going to tell you, speaking for myself and the board here, and they're all staying there, I'm going to tell you what, we're scared to death. I point out to you, not only could the man say the sentence, it could also be a truer reflection of reality, assuming that things were, that the fiscal condition of some area of our country, let's say, was getting on shaky ground, and even ordinary people begin to suspect it. Like, I smell a nor'easter, I smell a hurricane, I smell an earthquake, and I'm not sure, and experts come up and they study it and go, you people, you are well within your rights to be worried. Us experts looked into it, and we're scared to death. that makes even more sense. And yet I said it'll never happen. And everybody understands, yeah, you're right. And if it did happen, they would immediately go to black. They would fade the cameras out, and suddenly somebody would grab hold of me on the control room, and they'd do something, and they'd say, due to technical difficulties, we will now go to a rerun of the Lawrence Welk Christmas show or something. And you would read the next day about poor Dr. So-and-so has worked himself into an absolute tizzy, which is technical psychiatric talk, and he had to go away for a rest for his health reason. The point I want you to understand is, and you got to listen to one ear and then the other, because it all seems simple, and then it seems like, well, it could be, and then you realize, well, it could not be, or it would not happen. If anything too unexpected happens, and the perimeters are very limited. That's why I made up that example. I could have made up plenty in areas of morality and etc., but finances seem about as cold, objective, non-passionate as possible. And yet I point out that the man, the expert, says, well, I've looked into what the public and all the political commentators and all of you people on TV and everybody keeps talking about it, that you're just sure the economy is going south and things are getting worse. And we have studied it now for 2 weeks. The world's leading experts. We studied it. It's not just you people's opinion. And you're right. God damn, we're scared to death. You can say, well, that makes sense. If all the facts are true, then why does not the man get up there and say that? The perimeters of what is allowed in that are very limited. And someone who was formerly a pillar of stability and civility, should something happen and they suddenly say something like that, they are no longer a main player. They are no longer in the middle of the parade. They will be pushed right over, and they will consider it. The euphemism, as I said in the press, according to the man's social position, will be that he was suffering from extreme fatigue. But the point is, he went nuts. And he didn't go nuts by behavior because it was not criminal in the sense it would make the newspaper. He did not suddenly leap at a reporter and stab him. He did not suddenly mug somebody. His crime, unquote, was something he said. He was still standing there. He didn't begin to foam at the mouth. He didn't grow fangs. He didn't suddenly turn into Wolfman or a vampire. He said, we've studied the problem, and I know what kind of concerns have been going around the country. Now, I knew them for the last 6 or 8 months. The press and everyone's been saying the economy, something smells bad, there's some sort of rot at the core of our economy. And we have studied it. And you're right! Now, he hasn't done anything. Of course, I'm sort of exaggerating. He wouldn't even have to get all that yelly if he just, well, yeah, he would. But you understand, that is not permitted. And you understand the situation I'm making up, it could be true. That he is simply stating the facts after experts looking into it, and yet that will not be tolerated. If it accidentally got said, which it won't, but if it did get said, you do know. But remember, this is not behavior. The press would call it behavior. They would first say about how overworked he was, and that's the next day, and it has gone into a hospital to recuperate for his health, to rest. That's what they normally say. And then they'll mention something, they'll just in passing say, which of course explains his unusual behavior last night during the news conference. Of course, talk is behavior, but you understand how life keeps pushing. It's like it almost verges with being criminal activity. And criminal activity, by and large, is physical behavior, because when you think of criminal activity, you're normally thinking about things that are very close to the physical level. You know, assaults, rapes, robberies, all of it has to do with physical, either harm to another person or physically removing something of theirs. What has this guy done? Now, talk about behavior. What he did was say something that was out of the ordinary. You can go through life listening and think, well, I'll learn from everybody else, or I'll learn there's a secret, or I like to watch the news. That keeps me up to date. What do you mean keeps you up to date? People that say, well, I'm a news junkie. Boy, I got to read 3 or 4 papers a day and I got to watch all the shows. Well, it's a hobby, but to take that seriously just says one thing. Well, it says one of 2 things. I can make it more, but it says at least one of two things. One is you got the world's worst memory, or else you have never paid attention to what was going on. You just simply turn on the news and then go, with your eyes open maybe, and go, Or you pick up the Time magazine, the New York Times, you go, and you turn the page and you do all that. But as we all know, under lesser conditions, under more isolated conditions, somebody can come up and say, oh, were you reading that article there, in the middle of there was something about what was going on in Bosnia? And you go, yeah. And you go, well, I was meant to read that. What did it say? And you go, damn, wait a minute. What's the old thing that you're reading a book that you thought you were interested in, and then something happened, a noise outside, and you're still reading, and you realize, wait a minute, I just read a page and don't know what it was. You lost the thread, and you have to turn back. Well, your eyes actually read the page, and you go, everybody knows that. So that's the one or two possibilities. Anytime you think that there is something new to be heard out in the marketplace. So, well, I want to keep up with the news. I want to hear what they're going to do in Bosnia. I want to hear what they're going to do about the would-be breakaway republics in Russia. I want to know what Brazil finance minister says he's going to do about this hyperventilation, hyperinflation. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't keep up with. And it sounds all right as long as it's a hobby, and you think, well, this is important. I want to keep up because they've got a brand new finance minister. So, you think he's going to say something new? You either have not been listening now for 40 years, or you've got the world's worst memory. That is, you're the kind of guy that they can't let have a coffee break at your job, because every time you're gone for 10 minutes, they got to retrain you. You remember that one? That's how you are intellectually. Why is the idea of secret knowledge so prevalent? Why will it not go away? Why is the idea that a mystical awakening or some sort of higher state of consciousness that many people, they just know it exists. People who drink coffee know it exists, whether they won't talk about it or not. People who attempt to meditate, go to church, they know it exists, another state of consciousness. But why can't you? Where is it? If somebody actually tried to talk about it, which again, life has got, catch-22 is nothing, by the way. It was originally catch-88. They just had to water it down for people to even read about it in fiction. Life has got itself protected to such a point that no one who knows anything is going to do this, but even people who think they know a little, who know a little bit, and get up and try to talk about it publicly, they got a shorter time on the public stage than the head of our president's financial Blue Ribbon Committee. The 30 or 40 seconds he had when he stood right there on live TV and went, we've said the matter, and God, we're more afraid than you are. You got a shorter time than him. Because life immediately, if somebody did it, you are just literally pushed to the side of the road. And I don't mean physically. I'm not trying to say that somebody talks is necessarily going to physically be pushed away or strung up on a cross or hung. It's just life just dismisses it. All sane people go, no. So there you are, you're stuck. Forget a rock and a hard place, or between the Greek and the Greek myth. You're stuck. You're stuck if you're out in the public, in the midst of the parade, looking for new information. You're stuck between criminal behavior and insanity. Let's see, where will we look first? Try channel 17. Well, those of you there in Omaha. Those of you in Eugene and I believe it's Buffalo, it's local channel 36 or 37. You'll get the point.